The whistle of the train pierced through the silence of the Montana territory as Penelope Clarke clutched her worn leather suitcase, her heart beating frantically in her chest. It was 1879, and she had just done something unthinkable. She had fled from the man who was supposed to become her husband within the hour. Dust swirled around her boots as she stepped onto the platform of Silver Creek, a small mining town nestled between rolling hills and vast open plains. Her blue traveling dress was wrinkled from the 3-day journey, and strands of auburn hair had escaped her once neat bun. The letter in her pocket felt heavy, the correspondence that had brought her west from Boston, full of promises from a man she'd never met. "Miss, you all right?" A young porter asked, noticing her pale face. "Yes, thank you," Penelope replied, though nothing was further from the truth. She had been a mail-order bride contracted to marry Harold Wilkes, a shopkeeper in Cottonwood Springs, 40 miles east. But when she'd arrived and caught sight of his cruel eyes and heard his brusque commands to the young shop girl cowering behind the counter, Penelope had made a split-second decision. She'd waited until he went to fetch the preacher and then boarded the next train westward. Silver Creek hadn't been her planned destination. It wasn't planned at all. It was simply where she'd ended up when her courage and the meager funds she'd kept hidden in her boot had carried her. The town sprawled before her, a collection of wooden structures lining a wide dirt main street. A saloon, general store, a Sayers office, and small hotel stood like sentinels against the vast Montana sky. Penelope drew a deep breath. She was alone, nearly penniless, and had broken a marriage contract, something that would scandalize any decent community once word spread. And in these frontier towns, word always spread. Her gaze settled on a faded sign, Silver Creek Hotel. With nowhere else to go and night approaching, she made her way toward it, each step heavy with uncertainty. Inside, a thin man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from a ledger. "Help you, madam. I need a room, please, just for tonight." The man's eyes assessed her travel-worn appearance. "That'll be 50 cents. Will your husband be joining you?" "I'm traveling alone," Penelope said, her voice steady despite her nerves. The clerk's eyebrows rose slightly. "I see. Well, we don't get many unmarried ladies traveling through these parts. What brings you to Silver Creek?" Before she could formulate a suitable lie, the door swung open behind her. Heavy boot steps crossed the wooden floor. "Evening, Pete," a deep voice called. "Got any mail for the double R?" "Just came in this morning, Mr. Reeves. Been waiting for you." Penelope turned slightly, catching sight of the newcomer. He stood well over 6 feet, broad-shouldered and lean-hipped in the way of men who worked the land. Dust coated his denim pants, and his face was partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat, but she could see a strong jaw darkened with stubble and eyes the color of a summer sky. "Much obliged," the cowboy said, accepting several envelopes from the clerk. His gaze shifted to Penelope, a flicker of curiosity crossing his features before he touched the brim of his hat in greeting. "Madam, Mr. Reeves owns the biggest cattle ranch in the county," Pete explained, seemingly proud to make the introduction. "Miss here is looking for a room." "Traveling alone," she says. Something in the clerk's tone made Penelope stiffen. The implication was clear. Even here in the wilds of Montana, a woman traveling alone was suspect. The cowboy Mr. Reeves studied her for a moment longer than was comfortable. "Welcome to Silver Creek," he said finally, his voice neutral. With another touch to his hat, he turned and walked out. Penelope paid for her room and followed the clerk upstairs, aware that she had just been assessed and dismissed. She didn't care. By tomorrow, she would figure out her next move. Perhaps there was work in this town, something respectable that would allow her to earn enough to move on, perhaps all the way to California. What she didn't know was that 40 miles east, Harold Wilkes was already penning telegrams to every town within 100 miles, describing his runaway bride and demanding her return. The room was sparse but clean: a narrow bed with an iron frame, a washstand with a cracked pitcher and bowl, and a small table beside the window that overlooked the main street. Penelope set down her suitcase and sank onto the bed, exhaustion washing over her. She had done it. She had broken free from what she was certain would have been a miserable life with Harold Wilkes. But freedom came with its own price, and she was already paying it with fear and uncertainty. As darkness fell over Silver Creek, she forced herself to make plans. In the morning, she would inquire about work. She had skills she could sew, keep accounts, and had been a governess briefly in Boston. Surely there was something she could do to earn her keep until she decided where to go next. With that thought providing small comfort, Penelope prepared for bed, unaware that her presence in town had already caused ripples that would soon become waves. Morning brought sunshine streaming through the thin curtains. Penelope dressed carefully in her second-best dress, a navy blue cotton with white trim at the collar and cuffs. She arranged her hair in a neat bun, aiming to present a picture of respectability despite her circumstances. The hotel dining room was nearly empty when she went down for breakfast. A young woman with blonde hair set a cup of coffee before her without being asked. "You must be the lady who came in on yesterday's train," the waitress said, her tone friendly. "I'm Susan. We don't get many new faces around here, especially ladies on their own." "I'm Penelope Clarke," she replied, deciding honesty about her name at least was the best policy. "And yes, I arrived yesterday. I'm actually looking for work. Would you happen to know if anyone in town is hiring?" Susan frowned thoughtfully. "Well, the mercantile might need help. Old Mrs. Foster does the books, and her eyesight isn't what it used to be, or maybe the school. Teacher left last month to get married." Hope flared in Penelope's chest. "I've worked as a governess before. I could certainly teach. You'd have to talk to Mayor Henderson about that." "He heads the town council." Susan glanced around and lowered her voice. "Fair warning, this town can be mighty particular about who teaches their children. They'll want to know where you came from and why you're here." The flare of hope dimmed. "I see. Don't look so down," Susan said kindly. "There's always something for folks willing to work." "Oh," she straightened as the door opened. "Morning, Mr. Reeves." Penelope turned to see the cowboy from the previous evening entering the dining room. In daylight, she could see him more clearly, tall and powerfully built, with sun-streaked brown hair and those striking blue eyes. He was handsome in a rugged way, his face weathered from years under the sun. "Morning, Susan," he replied, removing his hat. "Coffee, please, coming right up." "You sitting at your usual table?" He nodded and moved to a small table near the window. As he passed Penelope, he inclined his head slightly. "Miss Clarke." Surprise flickered through her. She hadn't told him her name. As if reading her thoughts, he smiled faintly. "Small town, word travels." A chill ran down her spine. If her name had spread so quickly, what else was being said about her? Susan returned with a pot of coffee. "Mr. Reeves, this is Miss Clarke. She's looking for work, maybe at the school." "Is that so?" The cowboy assessed her with those penetrating eyes. "You're a teacher." "I've worked as a governess," Penelope replied, lifting her chin slightly. "I'm well versed in literature, mathematics, and natural philosophy." Something like approval flickered in his gaze. "The school's been closed since Miss Winters left. 20-odd children with nowhere to go during the day. Their parents would be grateful to have someone take up the position." Hope resurfaced. "Do you think the mayor might consider me?" Henderson's practical. "If you can do the job, he'll likely give you a chance." His mouth quirked. Though he might wonder what brings a Boston governess all the way to Silver Creek. Penelope's cup froze halfway to her lips. "How did you know I'm from Boston? Your accent, faint, but it's there." He took a sip of his coffee. "I'm Matthew Reeves, by the way. Most folks call me Matt." "It's a pleasure to meet you properly, Mr. Reeves." "Likewise, Miss Clarke." His eyes held hers for a moment longer than necessary before he turned his attention to the newspaper Susan had brought with his coffee. Penelope finished her breakfast quickly, anxious to begin her inquiries about employment. As she stood to leave, Matt Reeves spoke again. "The mayor's usually at his office above the bank until noon. Mention my name if you like. Might help." Surprised by the offer, Penelope nodded. "Thank you, Mr. Reeves. I appreciate the assistance." Outside, the morning sun had already warmed the air. Silver Creek was coming alive, shopkeepers sweeping boardwalks, freight wagons rolling down the street, cowboys tying their horses at hitching posts. Penelope made her way toward the imposing brick building that housed the town bank. She was halfway there when a voice called out from behind her. "Miss Clarke." Turning, she saw a portly man hurrying toward her, waving a piece of paper. She recognized him as the telegraph operator from his position in the office she'd passed earlier. "Yes, telegram for you, miss," he said, slightly out of breath. "Just came through." Penelope frowned. No one knew she was here except. A cold dread filled her as she accepted the paper and unfolded it. Penelope Clarke stop return to Cottonwood Springs immediately stop breach of contract stop authorities notified stop Harold Wilkes. Her hands trembled. How had he found her so quickly? "Everything all right, miss?" The telegraph operator asked, watching her face pale. "Yes," she managed. "Thank you." She forced herself to continue toward the bank, but her mind was racing. Harold was looking for her and apparently intended to use the law to force her return. Could he do that? Was a marriage contract legally binding? She hadn't signed anything, merely exchanged letters and agreed to travel west, but frontier justice often operated by its own rules. The mayor's office was a small room above the bank, simply furnished with a desk and several chairs. Mayor Henderson was a thin man with a gray mustache and shrewd eyes that assessed Penelope carefully as she explained her interest in the teaching position. "We've been without a teacher for nearly a month," he said, steepling his fingers. "Parents are getting restless. You say you have experience." "Yes, sir. I worked as a governess for the Whitman family in Boston for 3 years, teaching their 3 children. And what brings you to Silver Creek, Miss Clarke? We're hardly a destination for cultured Eastern ladies." Penelope had prepared for this question. "My father passed recently, leaving me with little choice but to seek employment. I had always wished to see the West, and when I heard about opportunities for educated women in growing frontier towns, I decided to take the chance." It wasn't entirely a lie. Her father had died 2 years ago, leaving her in difficult circumstances that had eventually led her to agree to become a mail-order bride. "No family back east, no husband." "No, sir, I'm alone in the world." The mayor studied her for a long moment. "Matthew Reeves suggested you for the position, did he?" He mentioned it might be available. "I haven't known Mr. Reeves long enough for him to recommend me personally. Matt doesn't involve himself in town matters often. When he does, people listen." Henderson drummed his fingers on the desk. "The position pays $30 a month. School runs Monday through Friday, 8 to 3. You'll be expected to maintain discipline and teach reading, writing, arithmetic, history, and geography to children aged 6 to 16. Hope surged in Penelope's chest. "Are you offering me the position, Mayor Henderson, conditionally? 1 month's trial. If the children learn and the parents don't complain, we'll make it permanent." "Thank you, sir. I won't disappoint you. See that you don't." He opened a drawer and withdrew a key. "The schoolhouse is at the end of Pine Street. Living quarters in the back, small but adequate for a single lady. You can move in today if you wish. School starts Monday." Penelope could hardly believe her good fortune. A job and a place to live, all within hours of arriving in Silver Creek. Perhaps fate was finally smiling on her. Her elation dimmed somewhat when the mayor added, "One more thing, Miss Clarke. This is a respectable town. We expect our school teacher to be above reproach in her behavior. No saloons, no unseemly friendships, no entertaining gentlemen callers." "Is that clear?" "Perfectly clear, sir. I assure you my conduct will be exemplary." "Good, because small towns talk and reputations are easily damaged." His gaze sharpened. "I'd hate to discover there was some reason you left your previous situation that might reflect poorly on your character." The implied threat was clear. If her secret came out that she was a runaway bride who had broken a marriage contract, she would lose this position and any hope of respectability in Silver Creek. "You have nothing to worry about, Mayor Henderson," she said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. As she left the bank with the schoolhouse key clutched in her hand, Penelope tried to focus on her good fortune rather than her fear. She had a job, a roof over her head, and a chance to build a new life. Now she just had to make sure her past didn't catch up with her. The schoolhouse was a simple frame building painted white, with a small bell tower on top. Inside, rows of benches faced a teacher's desk on a raised platform. A blackboard covered the front wall, and shelves along the sides held a modest collection of books and slates. The living quarters at the back consisted of one room with a cast iron stove, a narrow bed, a table with 2 chairs, and a small dresser. It was plain but clean and blessedly private. Penelope set her suitcase on the bed and looked around at what would be her home for the foreseeable future. She had just begun unpacking when a knock sounded at the door. Opening it, she found herself face to face with Matthew Reeves. "Mr. Reeves," she said, surprise evident in her voice. "Miss Clarke." He held his hat in his hands. "I heard Henderson gave you the teaching job. Thought I'd come by and see if you needed any help settling in." "That's very kind of you. Got my wagon outside. Thought you might want to pick up some supplies at the mercantile, basics to get you started." Penelope hesitated. The mayor's warning about propriety was fresh in her mind, but she did need supplies, and it would be difficult to carry everything alone. "I would appreciate that, thank you." As they walked to his wagon, Matt asked, "Henderson give you the speech about respectability?" Penelope glanced at him, startled by his perception. "Yes, actually." A wry smile curved his lips. "He gives it to everyone. Don't take it personally." The mercantile was crowded with Saturday shoppers who paused in their conversations to stare openly as Penelope entered with Matt Reeves. She could almost see the speculation in their eyes. Who was this stranger? And why was the county's most eligible bachelor escorting her? "Don't mind them," Matt murmured as he picked up a shopping basket. "New faces are rare enough to be interesting." Penelope selected the essentials: soap, matches, coffee, flour, sugar, and a few other provisions. Matt added a lamp, a tin of kerosene, and a thick blanket to her basket. "Nights get cold, even in summer," he explained when she protested. "School board should provide these things, but they're tight-fisted. Consider it a welcome gift." At the counter, the proprietor, a thin man with wire spectacles, regarded Penelope with open curiosity. "You must be our new school teacher. Word spreads fast. I'm Elias Thompson." Penelope Clarke. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Boston, is it? Long way from home." Penelope tensed. "I'm making Silver Creek my home now." "Well, we're glad to have you. Children need learning." Thompson began tallying her purchases, then paused. "Say, you wouldn't happen to be traveling alone, would you?" Only there was a telegram came through earlier asking about a young lady from Boston named Penelope. Her heart stuttered. A telegram from some fellow in Cottonwood Springs. Seemed mighty anxious to find you. Beside her, Matt had gone very still. She could feel his gaze on her profile, but couldn't bring herself to meet his eyes. "I can't imagine why anyone would be looking for me," she said, forcing a light tone. "I have no connections in Cottonwood Springs." Thompson didn't look convinced, but he finished wrapping her purchases without further comment. Matt paid before she could protest, then carried the packages to his wagon. The ride back to the schoolhouse was silent. Penelope's mind raced. If Harold's inquiries had already reached Silver Creek, it wouldn't be long before the truth about her came out. And then what? Would she be forced to return? Would she lose her new position before she'd even begun? Matt helped carry her supplies into the schoolhouse quarters. As he set the last package on the table, he finally spoke. "Miss Clarke, I don't mean to pry, but if you're in some kind of trouble, it might be best to be honest about it. Small towns have long memories, but they can also be forgiving if you give them the chance." Penelope busied herself with unpacking to avoid his penetrating gaze. "I appreciate your concern, Mr. Reeves, but I assure you there's nothing to worry about." She could feel his hesitation, sense him weighing whether to press further. Finally, he sighed. "All right. But if you need help, you can find me at the Double R Ranch, 5 miles north of town, or leave word at the hotel. You've been very kind already. Thank you." He moved to the door, pausing with his hand on the knob. "One more thing, Miss Clarke. Whatever brought you to Silver Creek, whatever you're running from, this is a good town with good people. They'll stand by you if you give them the chance." With that, he left, leaving Penelope staring at the closed door, wondering if she'd just missed an opportunity to gain an ally in what was quickly becoming a precarious situation. Sunday passed quietly. Penelope prepared her lessons for the coming week, explored the modest library of schoolbooks, and cleaned the schoolroom until it shone. Several curious mothers brought their children by to meet the new teacher, their assessment obvious in their careful questions about her background and teaching methods. Penelope maintained her story that she was from Boston, had worked as a governess, and had come west seeking new opportunities after her father's death. It was close enough to the truth to sound convincing, yet vague enough to hide her real circumstances. By Monday morning, she felt reasonably prepared for her first day of teaching. She rang the school bell at precisely 8 o'clock, and within minutes, 24 children ranging from tiny 6-year-olds to gangly teenagers filed into the schoolhouse, eyeing her with curiosity and varying degrees of skepticism. "Good morning," she said, standing tall at the front of the room. "I am Miss Clarke, your new teacher. I look forward to getting to know each of you." The morning progressed better than she'd hoped. The children were generally well-behaved, if somewhat behind in their studies compared to their Eastern counterparts. By noon, Penelope had assessed their abilities and divided them into 3 groups based on their knowledge rather than strictly by age. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, a rider approached. Penelope recognized the telegraph operator who had delivered the message from Harold the day before. Her stomach tightened with apprehension. "Miss Clarke," he called, dismounting, "another telegram for you." With trembling fingers, she opened the paper. Penelope Clarke, Stop Sheriff Jenkins, arriving Silver Creek, Wednesday. Stop, prepare to return. Stop, breach of contract will not be tolerated. Stop, Harold Wilkes. The words swam before her eyes. Harold was sending someone to bring her back. Wednesday, just 2 days away. "Bad news, Miss Clarke?" the telegraph operator asked, noting her pallor. "No, just unexpected," she managed, forcing a smile. "Thank you for bringing it." The afternoon lessons were a blur as Penelope's mind raced with fear and desperate planning. She couldn't go back to Harold Wilkes, not after seeing his true nature. But what choice did she have? If a sheriff came with legal authority to return her, how could she refuse? When the last child had gone home, Penelope sat at her desk, head in her hands. She could run again, but to where? With barely any money and no friends beyond Silver Creek, her options were limited. And running would only confirm whatever story Harold was telling about her. A knock at the schoolhouse door startled her from her thoughts. Hastily wiping her eyes, she went to answer it, finding Matthew Reeves standing on the steps. "Mr. Reeves," she said, surprised. "What brings you here?" His expression was grave. "May I come in, Miss Clarke? I think we need to talk." She stepped back, allowing him entry. He removed his hat, turning it in his hands as he spoke. "I heard about the telegram. News travels fast." "Of course it did." Penelope sighed. "It seems my past has caught up with me sooner than I expected. I figured as much when Thompson mentioned Cottonwood Springs." Matt's blue eyes were steady on hers. "That's where Harold Wilkes has his shop, isn't it? The man who's sending a sheriff for you on Wednesday." Penelope stiffened. "How do you know that?" "I make it my business to know who's who in the territory. Wilkes has a reputation, not a good one." "What I can't figure is your connection to him." She considered continuing the deception, but found she lacked the energy. Besides, Matt Reeves had shown her nothing but kindness. Perhaps he deserved the truth. "I was to marry him," she admitted, sinking into her chair. "I came west as a mail-order bride." Matt's expression remained neutral, encouraging her to continue. "We corresponded for months. He seemed kind, educated. My options in Boston were limited after my father died. When Mr. Wilkes proposed marriage by letter, offering a comfortable home and position in society, it seemed like the answer to my prayers." "But it wasn't," Matt said softly. "No," Penelope shook her head. "When I arrived in Cottonwood Springs, I saw immediately that he was not the man his letters portrayed. He was cruel to his shop girl, spoke dismissively about the local Native Americans, and made it clear he expected absolute obedience from me." She took a shaky breath. "So I ran. I waited until he left to fetch the preacher, grabbed what I could carry, and boarded the next train west. I ended up here. And now he wants you back. He claims I've breached our contract." Penelope looked up at Matt, desperation in her eyes. "Can he do that? Can he force me to return and marry him?" Matt's jaw tightened. "Contract or not, no woman should be forced to marry against her will." He paced the small classroom, thinking, "This Sheriff Jenkins, do you know him?" "No, I assume he's from Cottonwood Springs." "There's no Sheriff Jenkins there." "Town marshal's named Putnam." Matt's eyes narrowed. "My guess is Wilkes is sending a hired man with a fake badge to bring you back." A chill ran through Penelope. "What can I do?" Matt was silent for a long moment, considering, then he said something that changed everything: "Marry me." Penelope stared at him, certain she'd misheard. "I beg your pardon, marry me," he repeated, his voice steady. "Before Wednesday. If you're already married, Wilkes has no claim on you, contract or not. But we barely know each other. Why would you offer such a thing?" Matt's expression softened slightly. "Because I know what Wilkes is like, and I wouldn't wish him on any woman. Because you're doing good work here already, those kids need you. And because—" he hesitated. "Because sometimes a man knows quality when he sees it." Penelope's mind whirled with confusion and a strange, unexpected flutter in her chest. "I can't ask you to sacrifice yourself for me. You didn't ask, I offered." He held her gaze steadily. "It wouldn't have to be a real marriage in anything but name, at least at first. You could live at the schoolhouse still, keep teaching. I'd make sure you were provided for, protected, and maybe with time." He left the rest unsaid, but something in his eyes made Penelope's breath catch. "This is madness," she whispered. "Maybe." A small smile touched his lips. "Or maybe it's just the West people make quick decisions out here, because sometimes that's what survival requires." Penelope stood and moved to the window, looking out at Silver Creek as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the dusty street. Marriage to a virtual stranger again was exactly what she'd run from. Yet Matthew Reeves was nothing like Harold Wilkes. There was a steadiness to him, a quiet strength that spoke of integrity, and what were her alternatives? Run again. Face Harold's sheriff and be dragged back to Cottonwood Springs, she turned back to Matt. "If I agree to this, you must understand that I need time. I cannot promise to be a wife to you in every sense, at least not immediately." "I understand." His voice was gentle. "I'm offering protection and a chance to build something, Miss Clarke. Nothing more until you're ready." Penelope took a deep breath. "Then yes, Mr. Reeves, I accept your proposal." The smile that spread across his face transformed his features, making him look younger, almost boyish. "Call me Matt, seems appropriate, considering." A small laugh escaped her despite the gravity of the situation. "And I'm Penelope." Matt nodded, then grew serious again. "We should do this quickly. Tomorrow, if possible. I'll speak to Reverend Collins tonight." "So soon?" Penelope's voice wavered. "Better not to give Wilkes or his man any opportunity." Matt reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I know this isn't how you imagined things would go, but I promise you, Penelope, I will be a good husband to you. You'll want for nothing that's in my power to provide." The sincerity in his eyes was unmistakable, and for the first time since fleeing Cottonwood Springs, Penelope felt something like hope. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." He squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "I'll come for you tomorrow after school. We'll go to the Reverend's together." After Matt left, Penelope sank onto her narrow bed, overwhelmed by the day's events. In less than 24 hours, she would be married not to Harold Wilkes, but to Matthew Reeves, a man she barely knew but who had offered her safety and respect when she needed it most. It wasn't the life she'd imagined for herself, but perhaps, in time, it might become something more than a marriage of convenience. The thought should have frightened her, but instead, she found herself wondering about the man who would be her husband, his life, his past. What made him the kind of person who would extend such an extraordinary offer to a stranger in need? Sleep was elusive that night, as Penelope alternated between anxiety and a strange, fluttering anticipation of what the next day would bring. Morning arrived with golden sunlight streaming through the small window of Penelope's quarters. She dressed with particular care in her best dress, a forest green wool with delicate embroidery at the collar, and arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual. It wasn't how she'd imagined preparing for her wedding day, but she was determined to face it with dignity. The school day passed in a blur. Penelope found herself checking the clock frequently, heart jumping each time the schoolhouse door opened, fearing it might be Harold's sheriff arriving early. But the hours passed without incident, and when the last child had gone home, she hurried to her quarters to freshen up. She had barely finished washing her face when a knock came at her door. Taking a steadying breath, she opened it to find Matt standing there, freshly shaven and dressed in a clean white shirt, dark vest, and string tie. He looked remarkably handsome, his blue eyes bright against his sun-darkened skin. Ready? He asked simply. Penelope nodded, reaching for her shawl. As ready as I can be. The Reverend Collins was a kindly older man who didn't question their hasty wedding, though Penelope caught the knowing looks his wife gave them. No doubt they assumed the typical reason for such urgency. The ceremony was brief and simple. They stood in the Reverend's parlor, with Mrs. Collins and the Reverend's daughter as witnesses. Penelope's hand trembled slightly as Matt slipped a plain gold band onto her finger, a ring he must have purchased that day, though he hadn't mentioned it. I now pronounce you man and wife, Reverend Collins declared. You may kiss the bride. Penelope hadn't considered this part. She felt heat rise in her cheeks as Matt turned to her, his expression softening. He leaned down, and she thought he would merely brush his lips against hers, but instead he cupped her cheek gently and pressed a soft, lingering kiss to her mouth. It was respectful yet undeniably tender, sending an unexpected warmth through her. Mrs. Reeves, he murmured when he pulled away, a smile touching his eyes. The name startled her. Penelope Reeves. It would take some getting used to. After signing the marriage certificate and accepting the Reverend's good wishes, they stepped out into the late afternoon sunlight. Matt's wagon was waiting, and he helped her up onto the seat. I thought you might want to collect your things from the schoolhouse, he said as he took the reins. Unless you'd prefer to continue living there for now, Penelope hesitated. I should stay there through this week at least, I think. The children are just getting used to me, of course. If he was disappointed, he didn't show it. But you should know, you have a home at the Double R whenever you're ready. As they drove back toward the schoolhouse, Penelope became aware of the stares following them. Word of their hasty marriage had clearly spread already, and townsfolk paused in their activities to watch the wagon pass. They're going to talk, she said quietly. Matt's mouth quirked. Let them. They'd talk regardless. I'm more concerned about the school board. Mayor Henderson warned me about propriety. If they think I came here specifically to trap you into marriage, no one who knows me would believe I could be trapped into anything, Matt interrupted, his voice firm. Besides, the school board knows they're lucky to have a qualified teacher. They won't risk losing you over gossip. They had just reached the schoolhouse when a rider approached from the opposite direction, pulling his horse to a stop beside their wagon. It was the telegraph operator again, his expression apologetic. Mrs. Reeves, congratulations. By the way, another telegram came for you. Marked urgent. Penelope exchanged a glance with Matt before accepting the paper. This time, she opened it without hesitation. Arriving tomorrow, stop, prepare to return, stop, marriage ruse, will not deter me, stop, Harold Wilkes. Her blood ran cold. He's coming himself, tomorrow, and he knows somehow he knows about our marriage. Matt took the telegram from her trembling hand, his expression hardening as he read it. He's trying to frighten you. He turned to the telegraph operator. When did this come through? About an hour ago, sent from Junction City. Matt nodded grimly. That means he's on his way, probably taking the evening train. What do we do? Penelope asked, fear evident in her voice. We face him. Matt's voice was steady, together, but not here at the schoolhouse. He made a quick decision. Pack what you need for a few days. You're coming to the Double R with me tonight. But the school, send word you're ill. One day won't matter. But I want you somewhere safe when Wilkes arrives, not alone in the schoolhouse. The urgency in his voice convinced her. Penelope hurried inside to pack a bag while Matt made arrangements with the telegraph operator to deliver a message to Mayor Henderson about her absence. 30 minutes later, they were headed north out of Silver Creek, the wagon rolling swiftly along a well-worn road. Penelope sat straight-backed beside her new husband, torn between fear of what tomorrow would bring and a strange sense of security in Matt's steady presence. Tell me about him, Matt said after they had traveled in silence for some time. What kind of man is Harold Wilkes? Penelope considered the question carefully. He's controlled. Everything in his letters was measured, precise. When I met him, I saw that extended to how he treats others. He expects absolute compliance. There's a coldness to him, a hardness in his eyes when he's displeased. Not a man who accepts being denied what he wants. No, she agreed softly. He spoke about me as if I were another piece of inventory for his store, something he'd purchased and now owned. Matt's jaw tightened. You're not property. In his mind, I am. He paid for my train ticket west after all. She twisted her hands in her lap. I did write to him before leaving Boston, agreeing to his proposal. In a legal sense, perhaps I did break our contract. A marriage proposal isn't a binding contract, Matt said firmly, and even if it were, it would be nullified by our marriage. He glanced at her, his expression softening. You're my wife now, Penelope. Legally and in the eyes of God, Wilkes has no claim on you. The words sent an unexpected flutter through her chest. Your wife. Despite the circumstances, there was something profoundly reassuring about having such a steadfast defender. As the wagon crested a rise, the Double R Ranch came into view, a sprawling collection of buildings nestled in a valley beside a creek. A large two-story house of rough-hewn timber stood at the center, flanked by a barn, bunkhouse, and various outbuildings. Fields of grazing cattle stretched into the distance. It's beautiful, Penelope breathed. Pride touched Matt's features. My father started with nothing but 100 acres and 20 head of cattle. Now the Double R runs over 5,000 acres and 800 head. He guided the horses toward the main house. It's a good life, hard work but rewarding. Several ranch hands called greetings as they approached. Matt returned them with easy familiarity as he pulled the wagon to a stop before the house. Miss Carmen, he called as he helped Penelope down. Got someone I'd like you to meet. The front door opened, and a stout Mexican woman in her 50s emerged, wiping her hands on her apron. Her eyes widened at the sight of Penelope. Don't tell me you finally went and found yourself a wife, Matthew Reeves, she said, her accented voice warm with affection and surprise. Yes, madam, I did. Matt placed a hand lightly at the small of Penelope's back. Miss Carmen, this is Penelope. Penelope, this is Carmen Diaz. She's been keeping this house and me in order since I was knee-high to a grasshopper. Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Diaz, Penelope said, offering her hand. Just Carmen, Querida. The housekeeper took Penelope's hand in both of hers. And I am very pleased to meet you. This one, she tilted her head toward Matt, has been alone too long. The house needs a woman's touch. Matt cleared his throat. Penelope's the new schoolteacher in town. We were married this afternoon by Reverend Collins. Carmen's eyebrows rose at the hasty timeline, but she merely smiled. Then this calls for a special supper. Come inside, both of you. You must be tired from your journey. The interior of the house was surprisingly comfortable, simply furnished, but clean and well-maintained. A large stone fireplace dominated the main room, flanked by bookshelves filled with volumes that caught Penelope's eye immediately. Navajo rugs brightened the wooden floors, and large windows let in the late afternoon light. Your room is ready upstairs, Carmen told Penelope. First door on the right. I'll bring up some hot water for washing. As the housekeeper bustled off, Matt set Penelope's bag down by the stairs. Carmen has her own cabin behind the house, but she's here from sunrise to sunset most days. There are 4 hands who live in the bunkhouse year-round, plus extra help during roundup and branding. Penelope nodded, taking it all in. This was to be her home eventually, at least. The thought was both daunting and strangely comforting. You should rest before supper, Matt suggested. Tomorrow will be challenging. The reminder of Harold's imminent arrival dampened the moment. What do you think he'll do? Matt's expression turned serious. Bluster, threaten, perhaps try to intimidate you into going with him, but he has no legal standing, Penelope. You're my wife now, and Silver Creek is my territory, not his. He'll find no support here. His confidence was reassuring, but Penelope couldn't quite shake her unease. I hope you're right. I am. Matt touched her arm lightly. I promise to protect you, and I will. Now get some rest. Carmen will call you for supper. The bedroom was larger than Penelope had expected, dominated by a 4-poster bed with a colorful quilt. A dresser, washstand, and small writing desk completed the furnishings. It was clearly Matt's room. His shaving kit lay on the dresser, and a pair of worn boots stood in the corner. The realization that they would be sharing these quarters eventually brought heat to her cheeks. Carmen arrived with hot water and towels, chatting amiably as she helped Penelope unpack the few things she'd brought. The older woman's warmth and matter-of-fact acceptance of the situation was soothing, and by the time she went downstairs for supper, Penelope felt more composed. Matt was waiting in the dining room, freshly washed and changed. He held her chair as she sat, then took his place at the head of the table. Carmen served a hearty meal of beef stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert, exclaiming that they must celebrate the occasion properly even if the wedding had been sudden. "Tomorrow I will prepare a proper feast," she insisted. "We must invite the Hands to meet the new mistress of Double R." "That's very kind but not necessary," Penelope began, only to be waved off. "Nonsense. A wedding should be celebrated." After Carmen had cleared the dishes and bid them good night, Matt led Penelope back to the main room, where a small fire took the chill from the evening air. "Carmen seems pleased about our arrangement," Penelope observed, settling into an armchair. Matt smiled faintly. "She's been after me to marry for years, says a ranch this size needs a woman's touch. And what do you think it needs?" His gaze held her steadily. "Same as any home, I suppose. Warmth, purpose, someone to share the good days and weather the bad ones." The simple honesty of his answer touched her. "I hope I can provide that in time." "You will." His confidence was unwavering. "You're stronger than you know, Penelope. Running from Wilkes took courage or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." He stoked the fire, adding another log. "Speaking of Wilkes, we should discuss how to handle tomorrow." They spent the next hour planning their approach. Matt suggested meeting Harold at the Silver Creek Hotel rather than allowing him to come to the ranch or the schoolhouse. "Neutral ground with witnesses," he explained. "Less chance of him causing a scene." Penelope agreed, though the thought of facing Harold again made her stomach twist with anxiety. When she finally retired to bed alone, as Matt insisted on taking the sofa downstairs, despite her protests, she found sleep elusive once more. The bed was comfortable, the room quiet except for the occasional distant lowing of cattle, yet her mind refused to settle. So much had changed in just a few days. She had fled one marriage only to enter another, albeit under very different circumstances. She had a husband now, a kind, honorable man who had risked his reputation and offered his name to protect her. But what kind of marriage would it be? Matt had promised to give her time, to expect nothing until she was ready. But what if she was never ready? What if the shadows of her past kept her from embracing the future he offered? With these thoughts circling in her mind, Penelope eventually drifted into a restless sleep. Morning came too quickly. Penelope dressed in her most severe outfit, a high-necked navy dress with minimal trimming, and arranged her hair in a tight bun. She wanted to present a picture of unassailable propriety when they faced Harold. Matt was already up when she descended, dressed in what she was learning was his usual attire: denim pants, sturdy boots, a cotton shirt, and leather vest. He'd added a string tie for the occasion, a concession to formality that she found oddly touching. "Sleep well?" he asked, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Well enough." She accepted the cup gratefully. "And you? The sofa couldn't have been comfortable. I've slept in worse places." He studied her face. "Nervous, terrified," she admitted, "but also resolute. I won't go back with him, Matt." "You won't have to." His voice was firm. "We'll face him together and then it will be over." After a quick breakfast, they set out for town. The ride was mostly silent, each lost in their own thoughts. Penelope rehearsed what she would say to Harold, how she would stand firm against his anger and demands. Silver Creek was buzzing with activity when they arrived. It was market day, and the main street was lined with wagons and stalls selling everything from fresh produce to handcrafted goods. As they made their way toward the hotel, Penelope became aware of the stares and whispers following them. "Word of our marriage has definitely spread," she murmured. "Good." Matt's hand rested lightly at the small of her back, guiding her through the crowd. "Let Wilkes hear it from every person he meets." The Silver Creek Hotel lobby was busy with travelers and locals alike. Pete the clerk nodded to them from behind the desk, his eyes curious as he took in Penelope's presence at Matt's side. "Morning, Mr. Reeves, Mrs. Reeves. Something I can help you with? We're expecting a visitor from Cottonwood Springs," Matt said. "Harold Wilkes. Has he checked in yet?" Pete's eyes widened slightly. "Yes, sir. Arrived on the morning train. He's taken a room for the night, number 7. Asked a lot of questions about the new schoolteacher, as a matter of fact." Matt nodded. When he comes down, please let him know we'd like to speak with him in the dining room. They took a table near the window, positioning themselves so they could see anyone entering. Penelope sat rigidly, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Matt ordered coffee for them both, his manner casual as if this were merely a social call. Breathe, he reminded her gently. Remember, you've done nothing wrong, she nodded, trying to relax her tense shoulders. I just want this over with. They didn't have to wait long. Less than 20 minutes later, Harold Wilkes strode into the dining room, his narrow face set in lines of barely controlled anger. He was a thin man of medium height, with receding dark hair and cold gray eyes. His suit was expensive but somber, giving him the appearance of an undertaker rather than a shopkeeper. Penelope, he said, ignoring Matt completely as he approached their table. I see you've managed to make quite a mess of things. Matt stood, his height and breadth making Harold seem smaller by comparison. Mr. Wilkes, I presume. I'm Matthew Reeves. Please join us. Harold's gaze flicked dismissively over Matt before returning to Penelope. I've come to bring you back to Cottonwood Springs as per our agreement. Whatever arrangement you've made here can be dealt with. I'm not going anywhere with you, Mr. Wilkes, Penelope said, her voice steadier than she felt. Our correspondence did not constitute a binding contract, and even if it did, I am now legally married to Mr. Reeves. Harold's mouth twisted. A convenient solution, no doubt hastily arranged when you learned I was coming for you. Tell me, Mr. Reeves, did she mention she was promised to another man when she convinced you to marry her? Matt remained calm. My wife didn't convince me of anything. Our marriage was my suggestion, and I'm fully aware of the circumstances that brought her to Silver Creek. Your wife. Harold's tone made the word an insult. A woman who runs from her commitments is hardly worthy of the title. The marriage can be annulled easily enough when the authorities learn of her prior contract. There is no prior contract, Matt said firmly. An exchange of letters does not constitute a legally binding agreement, especially when no formal engagement was announced or documented. She accepted my proposal and traveled west at my expense specifically to become my bride. And changed her mind upon meeting you, Matt countered, as is her right. Harold's face flushed with anger. I've spoken with Judge Carlton in Cottonwood Springs. He believes I have grounds for a suit against both of you, her for breach of promise and you for alienation of affections. Penelope's heart sank. A lawsuit would mean scandal, regardless of the outcome. Her position as schoolteacher would almost certainly be forfeit. Matt, however, remained unruffled. Interesting, because I spoke with Judge Carlton myself just last month at the Territorial Association meeting. Fine man. Mentioned he was retiring due to his health. So unless you spoke to him from beyond the grave, Mr. Wilkes, I think we both know you're bluffing. Harold's expression faltered for just a moment before he recovered. The point remains she came west to be my wife, using my money under false pretenses. I'll reimburse your expenses, Matt said calmly. Every penny for the train ticket, meals, whatever else you paid, consider it a wedding gift to my wife and me. This isn't about money, isn't it? Matt leaned forward slightly. Because it seems to me, Mr. Wilkes, that you're upset about losing something you paid for, but Penelope is a person, not merchandise for your store. You know nothing about it, Harold hissed. This woman agreed to be my wife. She has obligations. The only obligations I have now are to my husband, Penelope interrupted, finding her voice. I made a mistake in agreeing to your proposal without knowing you better, Mr. Wilkes. I rectified that mistake by leaving before any vows were spoken. Whatever you believe I owe you, I am prepared to repay financially, but nothing more. Harold stared at her, his face mottled with rage. You'll regret this, Penelope, both of you will. He turned to Matt. You think you've won, taking what was mine, but this isn't over. Matt stood again, towering over the smaller man. Actually, it is over. My wife has made her choice clear. You've been offered fair compensation for your expenses. Now I suggest you finish your business in Silver Creek and return to Cottonwood Springs without further trouble. Something in Matt's tone, a quiet, deadly seriousness, seemed to penetrate Harold's anger. He glanced around, perhaps noticing for the first time how many locals were watching the exchange with undisguised interest. This territory has laws, he said stiffly. I intend to pursue them." "As is your right," Matt replied evenly. "Good day, Mr. Wilkes." Harold glared at them both before turning on his heel and stalking out of the dining room. Penelope released a shaky breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Do you think he'll really pursue legal action?" she asked softly. Matt sat back down, taking her hand gently. "No, he knows he has no case and he won't want to expose himself to ridicule by trying. His pride is hurt, that's all. I've never seen him so angry. Men like Wilkes don't handle rejection well." Matt's thumb stroked the back of her hand soothingly. "But he's a businessman first. Once he calms down, he'll recognize that accepting payment for your ticket is his best option." Penelope nodded, wanting to believe him. "Thank you for standing with me." "Always," he replied simply, and something in his eyes made her heart skip. They remained at the hotel for another hour, speaking with the sheriff to ensure he was aware of the situation should Harold cause any trouble. By the time they left, word had spread throughout Silver Creek about the confrontation and its outcome. To Penelope's surprise, the town's reaction was largely positive. As they walked to Matt's wagon, several people stopped them to offer congratulations on their marriage or words of support. Susan from the hotel dining room actually embraced Penelope, whispering, "Good for you," in her ear. "I don't understand," Penelope said as Matt helped her into the wagon. "I expected them to judge me harshly for running from a commitment." Matt smiled as he took his seat beside her. "Silver Creek has a long memory. Wilkes has done business here before, and not always honestly. Besides, folks here value courage and independence. You showed both." As they drove back toward the schoolhouse, Penelope felt lighter than she had in days. Harold might still cause problems, but she was no longer alone. She had Matt, and unexpectedly, it seemed she had the support of her new community as well. "Will you be comfortable staying at the schoolhouse tonight?" Matt asked as they approached the small white building. "I can bring some of the hands to keep watch if you're concerned about Wilkes." "I think I'll be fine," she assured him. "Harold may be angry, but I don't believe he'd risk doing anything rash." Matt nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. "I'll come by in the morning before school starts, just to make sure." "You don't need to, I want to." His voice was firm. "You're my wife now, Penelope. Your safety matters to me." The simple declaration warmed her. "Thank you, Matt, for everything." He helped her down from the wagon, but instead of immediately saying goodbye, he stood before her, an unreadable expression in his blue eyes. "I know our marriage didn't start in the usual way," he said quietly. "But I want you to know that I meant what I said to Reverend Collins yesterday. I intend to be a good husband to you in whatever way you need me to be." Penelope looked up at him, struck by the earnestness in his face. This man had risked his reputation and offered his name to protect her from Harold Wilkes, expecting nothing in return. In the short time she'd known him, he'd shown her nothing but kindness, respect, and steady strength. Something shifted inside her, a wall beginning to crumble, a seed of possibility taking root. "Perhaps," she said softly, "we could have dinner together tomorrow, at the ranch. If you're not too busy, that is." The smile that spread across his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "I'd like that very much. So would I." And to her own surprise, she meant it. As Matt drove away, Penelope stood watching until his wagon disappeared around the bend. Her life had changed dramatically in just a few days, from mail-order bride to runaway to schoolteacher to wife. None of it had gone according to plan. Yet somehow, standing in the afternoon sunlight with the memory of Matt's smile warming her, she couldn't bring herself to regret any of it. The next morning, true to his word, Matt arrived at the schoolhouse before classes began. He brought fresh bread from Carmen and a small bouquet of wildflowers that he presented almost shyly. "To brighten your desk," he explained. The gesture touched Penelope deeply. It was thoughtful without being presumptuous, acknowledging their new relationship while respecting the boundaries they'd established. "Thank you," she said, arranging the flowers in a jar of water. "They're beautiful." "Carmen wanted to send half the pantry, but I convinced her you probably couldn't manage it all on horseback." His eyes crinkled with amusement. "She's determined to fatten you up, says you're too thin." Penelope laughed. "She sounds like my grandmother. A strong wind would blow you away, child." "You'll have to tell me about her sometime. Your family." Matt leaned against her desk, his expression curious. I realize there's a lot we don't know about each other. Yes, there is. Penelope hesitated. Tonight, perhaps, over dinner, I'd like that. He straightened as the school bell began to ring, signaling it was nearly time for classes to start. I should let you get to work. I'll come by to fetch you after school lets out. The day passed quickly. Penelope found it easier to focus on her lessons now that the threat of Harold Wilkes had been addressed. The children were attentive and eager to learn, and several parents who dropped by seemed genuinely pleased with her teaching methods. Mayor Henderson visited briefly during the lunch break, his manner cordial if a bit reserved. Heard you had some excitement yesterday, Mrs. Reeves, he said, emphasizing her new name slightly. Quite a whirlwind romance, I must say. Penelope met his gaze steadily. Yes, it was rather sudden. Sometimes the heart knows what it wants. Henderson studied her for a moment. Matthew Reeves is one of the most respected men in the county. His ranch employs a dozen men year-round, and his cattle drive brings significant business to Silver Creek. The school board wouldn't want to interfere with his personal happiness. The implication was clear: her position was safe, not because of her own merits, but because of who she had married. Penelope swallowed her pride and nodded. I appreciate the school board's understanding. I assure you, my commitment to the children's education remains my highest priority. See that it does. Henderson turned to leave, then paused. For what it's worth, Mrs. Reeves, that Wilkes fellow made quite an impression at the saloon last night, not a favorable one. If you chose Matthew over him, I'd say you showed good judgment. With that surprising endorsement, he left, leaving Penelope to ponder the complex web of relationships and power that defined life in small western towns. When classes ended for the day, Penelope found Matt waiting outside with his wagon. Several of the children waved to him as they ran past, clearly familiar with the rancher. He returned their greetings by name, asking one boy about his father's injured leg and another girl about her new baby sister. You know the children well, Penelope observed as he helped her into the wagon. Most of them. Their families have been here for years. Matt climbed up beside her. Small community, everyone knows everyone else's business. I'm beginning to understand that, she smiled ruefully. I imagine our hasty marriage is the main topic of conversation at the moment. Probably. He didn't seem troubled by the thought. They'll find something else to talk about soon enough. Josephine Miller's expecting twins, and the Anderson's son is coming home from back east with a city wife. That should keep tongues wagging for at least a month. The easy way he referred to the town's inhabitants, the genuine interest he showed in their lives, told Penelope volumes about the kind of man she had married. Matt Reeves was deeply embedded in this community, respected not just for his wealth and position but for his character. The double R looked different in the daylight, more expansive, more alive. Cowboys moved between the outbuildings, horses grazed in the nearby pastures, and the smell of fresh-cut hay filled the air. It felt like a working organism, each part contributing to the whole. It's impressive, Penelope said honestly as they approached the main house. You've built something remarkable here. My father started it. I've just tried to honor his vision. There was pride in Matt's voice, but humility too. Carmen greeted them with obvious pleasure, ushering Penelope inside while Matt went to speak with his foreman about the day's work. The housekeeper had prepared a special dinner, she explained, to properly celebrate their marriage. Many of the hands want to meet you, Carmen said as she helped Penelope freshen up. Matthew is well respected. They are curious about the woman who captured his heart. Penelope felt a twinge of discomfort at the deception, but reminded herself that, in time, perhaps it wouldn't be a deception at all. She was determined to be a good wife to Matt, in whatever way their relationship evolved. Dinner was a lively affair. Carmen had outdone herself with a feast of roast beef, potatoes, fresh vegetables from the kitchen garden, and a rich chocolate cake for dessert. Matt's ranch hands 8 men ranging in age from barely 20 to well past 60 joined them, each making an effort to welcome Penelope in his own way. Jake, the grizzled foreman who had worked for Matt's father, presented her with a handcrafted wooden box for her teaching supplies. Young Tommy, the newest hand, shyly offered a bouquet of wildflowers he'd picked himself. Each gesture touched Penelope deeply, making her feel accepted into this small community. After dinner, when the hands had returned to the bunkhouse and Carmen had retired to her cabin, Matt and Penelope found themselves alone in the main room. A comfortable silence settled between them as Matt built a small fire to ward off the evening chill. "Your men seem like good people," Penelope said, settling into an armchair. "The best." Matt took the chair opposite hers. "Most have been with the ranch for years. They're like family." "They obviously think highly of you." A touch of color rose in Matt's tan cheeks. "I try to treat them fairly. My father always said a ranch is only as good as the men who work it." "Tell me about your father," Penelope prompted, genuinely curious. Matt's face softened with memory. "Michael Reeves, toughest man I ever knew but fair to a fault, came west with nothing but determination and the clothes on his back. Built this place acre by acre, head of cattle by head of cattle. And your mother, Sarah Reeves, she was a schoolteacher like you." His smile was bittersweet. "Gentle soul with a spine of steel, had to be to survive out here in the early days. She died when I was 16, pneumonia. Father followed 3 years later." "I'm sorry," Penelope said softly. "It must have been difficult taking on the ranch so young." Matt nodded. "It was. But Jake helped me through it. And I had my mother's voice in my head, telling me education was as important as ranching. She's the reason I kept going back to school even after Father died, finished up properly." The revelation surprised Penelope. Many ranchers in the West had minimal formal education. "Where did you study?" "St. Louis for 2 years, then a year in Chicago." A corner of his mouth lifted. "Surprised? A bit," she admitted. "You don't strike me as, that is." "As a city-educated man." His eyes twinkled with amusement. "Don't let the hat and boots fool you, Mrs. Reeves. I can discuss Shakespeare or cattle feed with equal enthusiasm." The easy way he referred to her as Mrs. Reeves sent a warm flutter through Penelope's chest. "Now I'm even more curious. What made you return to ranching instead of pursuing a profession in the city?" Matt gazed into the fire for a moment. "The land. It gets in your blood, and the freedom of it answering to no one but yourself and nature. I tried city life. It didn't fit." He turned his gaze back to her. "What about you? What brought Penelope Clarke from Boston society to the wilds of Montana as a mail-order bride?" Penelope sighed, knowing she owed him honesty. "Necessity, mainly. My father was a professor of literature at a small college. When he died, he left significant debts. I had been teaching as a governess, but the pay was barely enough to support myself, let alone address the debts. No other family, a distant cousin in Philadelphia who made it clear she had no room for charity cases." Penelope's smile was wry. "I saw an advertisement in a newspaper, respectable businessman seeking educated wife for companionship and to help with his business. Harold's letters were eloquent, respectful. He seemed like the answer to my prayers. Until you met him." "Yes," she shuddered slightly, remembering. "It was the way he spoke to his shop girl like she was less than human. And then he began listing all the ways I would make myself useful to him, as if I were an investment that needed to provide returns." Matt's expression darkened. "You were right to leave. I know that now. At the time, I felt like a coward, running away instead of honoring my commitment. There's a difference between courage and foolhardiness." Matt leaned forward, his gaze intent. "Choosing your own path despite the consequences that takes real courage, Penelope." The conviction in his voice warmed her. For so long, she had felt adrift, making decisions based on necessity rather than desire. But here, in this moment, with this man who had offered her safety and respect without demanding anything in return, Penelope felt something new taking root, a sense of possibility, of hope for a future of her own choosing. "Thank you," she said softly, "for understanding, for everything." Matt smiled, and in the firelight, she saw something in his eyes that made her heart beat a little faster. "We should probably head back to town," he said, though his tone suggested reluctance. "You have school tomorrow." Penelope nodded, though part of her wished to stay longer in this comfortable room with its warm fire, and the man whose presence was becoming increasingly important to her. The ride back to the schoolhouse was quiet, both lost in their own thoughts. When they arrived, Matt helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering slightly at her waist. "Thank you for coming to dinner," he said. Carmen was pleased, so was I. I enjoyed it very much. Penelope hesitated, then added, perhaps I could come again, this weekend. The smile that lit his face was answer enough. I'd like that. Saturday, I could show you more of the ranch. Saturday, she agreed. Good night, Matt. Good night, Penelope. He waited until she was safely inside before driving away, a courtesy that touched her. As she prepared for bed, Penelope found herself smiling, anticipating Saturday with a flutter of excitement that had nothing to do with obligation and everything to do with genuine desire to spend time with her husband. The next few days fell into a pattern. Each morning, Matt would arrive at the schoolhouse with fresh bread or fruit from Carmen and stay for a few minutes to chat before Penelope's students arrived. Each afternoon, he would appear as classes ended to check on her and ensure she had everything she needed. They were small gestures, but they formed a gentle rhythm that Penelope found herself looking forward to. The children, of course, noticed immediately. Miss Clarke, Mrs. Reeves, Mary Anderson, a bright 10-year-old, said during Thursday's lunch break. Is it true you and Mr. Reeves got married 'cause you were running away from a bad man? Penelope nearly choked on her tea. Where did you hear that, Mary? The girl shrugged. My ma was talking to Mrs. Thompson at the store. She said you were real brave and that Mr. Reeves was a hero for helping you. Well, it's a bit more complicated than that, Penelope hedged, unsure how much was appropriate to share with her students. Pa says Mr. Reeves is the best man in the county, offered Tommy Jenkins, a freckle-faced 8-year-old. Says he helps folks when they need it fair and square. Penelope smiled despite her discomfort. Your father is right, Tommy. Mr. Reeves is a very kind man. Do you love him? Mary persisted, her eyes wide with romantic curiosity. The directness of the question startled Penelope. Did she love Matt? It was too soon for that, surely. They had known each other less than a week. Yet there was something growing between them, a warmth, a connection that felt increasingly significant. I respect and admire him very much, she said carefully. Now, I believe it's time to return to our lessons. The children groaned but complied, though Mary continued to give Penelope knowing glances throughout the afternoon. That evening, when Matt came to escort her to the hotel dining room for supper, another daily ritual they had established, Penelope shared the exchange with him. The children have some rather romantic notions about our marriage, she said, unable to keep the amusement from her voice. Matt chuckled. Let me guess, Mary Anderson, how did you know? That girl has her mother's curiosity and her grandmother's lack of filter. His eyes twinkled. What did you tell her? Penelope felt her cheeks warm slightly. That I respect and admire you very much. Something flickered in Matt's eyes, a softness, a vulnerability that disappeared almost as quickly as it appeared. High praise indeed from a Boston-educated lady. I meant it, she said softly. He held her gaze for a long moment, something unspoken passing between them. I'm glad, he said finally, his voice low, because I respect and admire you too, Penelope Reeves, more than I can say. The moment stretched between them, charged with possibility. Then the dining room door opened, breaking the spell as several minors entered loudly, and the conversation turned to other topics. Saturday arrived with perfect early autumn weather, clear skies, gentle sunshine, and just enough crispness in the air to make riding comfortable. Matt appeared at the schoolhouse mid-morning with 2 horses, a picnic basket, and a plan to show Penelope the full extent of the Double R Ranch. I thought we might make a day of it, he explained, helping her mount a gentle bay mare. Carmen's packed enough food for an army as usual. The ride was magnificent. Matt led her through rolling pastures where fat cattle grazed, along bubbling creeks lined with cottonwood trees, and up to a ridge that offered a spectacular view of the entire valley. Throughout the journey, he pointed out landmarks and shared stories where his father had built the first cabin, where he had captured his first wild Mustang as a boy, which pastures yielded the best grass for winter hay. His love for the land was evident in every word, every gesture. This wasn't just property to him, it was heritage, legacy, home. Watching him in this element, confident and passionate, Penelope felt herself falling under the spell of both the land and the man. They stopped for lunch beside a small lake nestled among pine trees. Carmen had indeed packed generously cold chicken, fresh bread, cheese, apples, and even a small jar of honey for dessert. "It's paradise," Penelope said, looking out over the glittering water. "I've never seen anything so beautiful." Matt smiled, following her gaze. "It grows on you." "First time I came back from Chicago, I thought these mountains would swallow me whole. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "I understand that feeling. When I first arrived in Montana, everything seemed so vast, so wild. Boston's streets and buildings suddenly felt like a cage I'd escaped." "And now?" Matt asked, his eyes intent on her face. Penelope considered the question carefully. "Now I feel free, for perhaps the first time in my life. Teaching children who genuinely want to learn, living in a community where people know each other, being out here in all this beauty, it's nothing like I imagined my life would be, but I wouldn't change it. Even the hasty marriage to a rancher you barely knew." His tone was light, but she heard the genuine question beneath. "Especially that," she said honestly. "You've been kinder to me than anyone in my life since my father died, Matt. You offered protection when I needed it most, expecting nothing in return. How could I regret that?" He reached out slowly, taking her hand in his. "I didn't do it out of kindness alone, Penelope. Even then, I saw something in you, a courage, a spirit that called to me. I wanted to know you better, to be part of your life." The simple honesty of his words touched her deeply. "I'm glad you did," she whispered. Their eyes held, and for a moment Penelope thought he might kiss her. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "We should head back. I promised to show you the north pasture before sundown." The rest of the day passed in companionable exploration. Matt introduced her to the various aspects of ranch life: the spring roundup, branding, the fall cattle drive to the railroad. He spoke of his plans for expanding the herd, for breeding stronger stock that could withstand Montana's harsh winters. As the sun began to sink toward the western mountains, they returned to the main house, where Carmen had prepared another feast. This time, they dined alone, the conversation flowing easily from topics of books they both enjoyed to their hopes for Silver Creek's future. "The town needs a proper library," Penelope said passionately. "The school has barely 24 books, most of them badly worn. Children need access to literature, to ideas beyond their daily lives." "I agree." Matt looked thoughtful. "The old Miller place on Elm Street has been empty since old Tom passed last winter. It would make a fine library with some renovation." "That would be wonderful, but the cost is something the town council should consider investing in." Matt smiled at her enthusiasm. "I happen to sit on that council. I'll bring it up at the next meeting." "Really, you do that, for the town's children, and for you." His eyes held her steadily. "I told you, Penelope, I want to be a good husband to you. That means supporting the things that matter to you." The simple declaration warmed her heart. This man, who had already given her so much, continued to surprise her with his generosity of spirit. After dinner, they sat by the fire again, talking late into the evening. When the grandfather clock in the corner struck 10, Penelope realized with a start how late it had grown. "I should get back to town," she said reluctantly. Matt hesitated, then said, "You could stay. Here, I mean. This is your home too, Penelope, whenever you're ready." The invitation hung between them, fraught with meaning. Penelope knew he wasn't merely offering a place to sleep, he was offering a true marriage when she was prepared to accept it. "I'm not quite ready," she admitted softly, "but I think I could be, soon." The honesty in her voice seemed to please him. "I can wait," he said simply, "however long you need." He drove her back to the schoolhouse, the night air cool around them. At her door, he helped her down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. "Thank you for today," she said. "I enjoyed it tremendously." "So did I." He stood close, his face partially shadowed in the moonlight. "Penelope." "Yes." Instead of speaking, he lowered his head slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. When she didn't, he pressed his lips to hers in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened as she responded. His arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, and Penelope found herself melting against him, her hands coming to rest on his broad shoulders. When they finally parted, both were breathing unevenly. Matt rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as if savoring the moment. "I've wanted to do that since the moment I saw you in the hotel lobby," he confessed, his voice husky. Penelope's heart fluttered at the admission. "I'm glad you did," she whispered. "Very glad." He smiled, pressing one more brief kiss to her lips before reluctantly stepping back. "Good night, Penelope." "Good night, Matt." As she watched him drive away, Penelope touched her lips, still feeling the warmth of his kiss. Something fundamental had shifted between them, a step toward the real marriage they both increasingly seemed to want. The following weeks brought a deepening of their relationship. Penelope continued teaching during the day, but began spending more evenings at the ranch. Matt showed her every aspect of ranch operations, introduced her to neighboring ranchers and their wives, and brought her into the business decisions of running the Double R. For her part, Penelope found herself increasingly drawn to life at the ranch. She started a small kitchen garden with Carmen's guidance, learned to ride with greater confidence, and even helped during a difficult calving when every hand was needed. Each day brought new discoveries about ranching, about Matt, and about herself. In town, her position as teacher became more secure as the children thrived under her instruction. Even Mayor Henderson grudgingly admitted she was doing an excellent job, particularly with the older students who would soon be seeking employment or further education. Harold Wilkes had returned to Cottonwood Springs without further incident, accepting Matt's payment for Penelope's train fare with poor grace, but apparently recognizing that he had no legal recourse. As September gave way to October, the first snow dusted the mountain peaks surrounding Silver Creek. The cattle were moved to lower pastures in preparation for winter, and the ranch's pace slowed slightly as the most demanding work of the season concluded. One crisp Saturday, nearly a month after their wedding, Penelope was helping Carmen prepare preserves when Matt entered the kitchen, his expression unusually serious. "Carmen, could you give us a moment?" he asked politely. The housekeeper nodded, wiping her hands on her apron before stepping outside. Matt took a seat at the kitchen table, gesturing for Penelope to join him. "Is something wrong?" she asked, noting his solemn demeanor. "No, nothing's wrong." He took her hand, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "I just wanted to ask you something important." Penelope's heart quickened. "What is it?" "Winter's coming," he said, his blue eyes intent on hers. "The pass to Silver Creek can get snowed in for days, sometimes weeks. It would be difficult for you to travel back and forth from town." "I've been thinking about that too," she admitted. "I know we agreed you'd move to the ranch when you were ready." Matt's voice was careful, measured. "I'm not trying to rush you, Penelope, but I wanted to ask, would you consider making this your permanent home now, before the weather turns?" The question wasn't unexpected, yet Penelope felt its significance deeply. Moving to the ranch permanently would mean embracing her role as Matt's wife in every sense. Over the past month, their relationship had deepened through shared experiences, long conversations, and increasingly passionate encounters that always stopped short of true intimacy. She knew Matt was respecting her need for time, never pushing beyond what she was comfortable with. But the truth was, Penelope no longer wanted to wait. Somewhere between that first day in the hotel lobby and now, she had fallen in love with Matthew Reeves' strength, his kindness, his unwavering integrity. She loved the life they were building together, the partnership that had begun as convenience but had become something precious and real. "Yes," she said softly, "I would like that very much." The smile that spread across Matt's face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. "Really, really." Penelope squeezed his hand. "This past month has been the happiest of my life, Matt. I want to be your wife, truly your wife in every way." He stood, pulling her into his arms and capturing her lips in a kiss that left no doubt about his feelings. When they finally parted, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I love you, Penelope Reeves," he whispered. "I think I have since the first moment I saw you." Joy flooded through her at the words she had been longing to hear. "And I love you, Matthew Reeves, with all my heart." That evening, after a celebration dinner during which Matt announced to the ranch hands that Mrs. Reeves is finally coming home for good, Penelope moved her few belongings from the small room she had been using to the master bedroom. As she placed her hairbrush beside Matt's shaving kit on the dresser, she felt a sense of rightness, of belonging. When Matt joined her, closing the bedroom door behind him, there was a new tenderness in his eyes, a reverence in the way he approached her. "Are you sure?" he asked softly. "We can wait longer if you need." Penelope silenced him with a kiss, pouring all her newfound certainty into the gesture. "I'm sure," she whispered against his lips. "I want to be your wife, Matt, in every way." The night that followed was everything she had hoped for: gentle, passionate, a true union of two people who had found in each other something neither had expected, but both now treasured beyond measure. Afterward, lying in Matt's arms as the first snowflakes of the season drifted past their window, Penelope marveled at the journey that had brought her here. She had fled from one marriage only to find herself in another, but this one built on mutual respect, growing affection, and now deep and abiding love. "What are you thinking?" Matt murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes running away can lead you exactly where you're meant to be," she answered honestly. He smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "I'm glad you ran, Penelope Reeves, and I'm even more glad you stopped running when you found Silver Creek." "When I found you," she corrected softly. Outside, the snow began to fall more heavily, blanketing the ranch in pristine white. But inside the sturdy house that was now truly her home, Penelope was wrapped in warmth, security, and love, a mail-order bride who had found her own path to happiness, and a cowboy who had stood by her against the world. 3 years later, Penelope stood on the porch of the Double R Ranch, watching as Matt taught their 2-year-old son Michael to ride his first pony. The little boy's delighted laughter carried across the yard, matched by his father's proud smile. So much had changed since that fateful day when she'd stepped off the train in Silver Creek. The town had grown, partly due to Matt's influence on the council and Penelope's success with the school. The library she had dreamed of was now a reality, housed in the renovated Miller Place and stocked with books purchased through a combination of town funds and private donations, many from the Double R. Harold Wilkes had eventually sold his shop in Cottonwood Springs and moved further east, his brief pursuit of Penelope apparently forgotten. His replacement, a young couple from Denver, had established friendly trade relations with Silver Creek, creating a beneficial partnership between the two communities. As for Penelope and Matt, their marriage had blossomed into something neither could have predicted that day in Reverend Collins's parlor. What had begun as an arrangement of convenience had deepened into a partnership built on mutual respect, shared values, and profound love. The ranch prospered under their joint stewardship. Matt's innovative breeding programs had produced hardier cattle, while Penelope's organizational skills and education had improved the business aspects of the operation. Together, they had created not just a successful ranch but a true home. The sound of hoofbeats drew Penelope's attention as Jake, still serving as foreman despite his advancing years, rode into the yard. "Mail's here, Mrs. Reeves," he called, dismounting stiffly. "Quite a stack today." "Thank you, Jake." Penelope accepted the bundle, smiling as she recognized her sister-in-law's handwriting on the topmost envelope. Matt's younger sister, Elizabeth, had moved to Silver Creek the previous year after completing her nursing training in Chicago. She had quickly become an essential part of the community and a beloved aunt to little Michael. Among the letters was a newspaper, and a headline caught Penelope's eye: "Territory considers women's suffrage measure." She smiled, making a mental note to discuss it with the ladies' auxiliary at their next meeting. The group had been advocating for women's rights, with Penelope often lending her voice to the cause. "What's got you smiling?" Matt asked, approaching with Michael perched on his shoulders, the boy's small hands tangled in his father's hair. "Progress," she replied, showing him the headline. "The world is changing, Matt, for the better, I'd say." His eyes were warm as they met hers. "Especially when strong women have their say." Michael wiggled impatiently. "Down, Papa, I want to show Mama how I ride," Matt chuckled, swinging the boy to the ground. "Go on then, partner, show your mama what you learned." As their son scampered back to his pony, Matt slipped an arm around Penelope's waist, drawing her close. Happy? He asked softly. Penelope leaned into his embrace, looking out over the ranch that had become her home, at the son who embodied their love, and up at the man who had made it all possible by extending his hand when she needed it most. Completely, she answered truthfully. I never imagined I could be this happy. Even though you had to settle for a rough cowboy instead of a shopkeeper. His tone was teasing, but Penelope heard the genuine question underneath. She turned in his arms, framing his beloved face between her hands. I didn't settle, Matthew Reeves. I found exactly where I belong. His smile was tender as he lowered his head to kiss her, a kiss full of the love and partnership they had built together. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers in the gesture that had become so familiar over their years together. I love you, Penelope Reeves, he whispered. More every day. And I love you, she replied, her heart full. My cowboy who faced the town alone for a runaway bride he barely knew. Best decision I ever made, he said simply. As little Michael called for their attention, proudly demonstrating his newfound riding skills, Penelope silently agreed. Sometimes the most unexpected paths led to the greatest happiness. She had run from a future she feared, only to find a man who would stand beside her against whatever life brought their way. The mail-order bride who was shunned for running had found not just sanctuary but love, family, and purpose in the arms of a cowboy with the courage to make her his and face the town alone.